They didn't slam the door. That was the part that stayed with me. No shouting. No argument. No dramatic goodbye where someone regrets their words too late. Just a soft click behind them, like a mistake being sealed carefully so no one would hear it echo. I was standing in the lobby of Rose Hill Care, holding my purse like it still belonged to me, when my son kissed my cheek and told me I'd be safer here. He said it gently. Practiced. The way people speak when they've already decided your life no longer requires your input. It's temporary, Mom, Thomas said. Just until we make sure everything's okay. Everything. Such a small word to hide something so final. I watched him walk away without looking back. Counted the seconds in my head, 10, 15, 25. Waiting for him to realize he'd forgotten something important. Like me, he didn't come back. That was when I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision. The woman behind the desk had red lipstick that didn't match her voice. Her badge said Sandra. She smiled the way people do when they're trained to soften bad news. When can I leave? I asked. She looked at her screen, then at me, puzzled. You're a resident now, Mrs. Leland. The words didn't land right away. They floated like dust in sunlight. I didn't sign anything. You didn't have to, she said gently. Your son has power of attorney. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because something inside me went very still. When betrayal comes dressed as concern, your body doesn't always know how to react. Room 213 smelled like bleach and old fabric. The bed was tucked so tight it looked untouched, as if no one expected me to stay long enough to wrinkle it. On the windowsill sat a single framed photo of my late husband, placed there thoughtfully, like a prop meant to convince me this was home. But home had a porch swing that groaned when you sat too fast. Home had hydrangeas I trimmed every summer since 1984. Home knew my name without reading it off a chart. That night I didn't sleep. I listened instead. Doors opening. Coughs behind thin walls. Someone calling out a name that never answered. I told myself it was temporary. That's what people say when they're afraid to admit they've been erased. And as I lay there staring at the ceiling, a single thought kept returning. Quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. If this place was meant to keep me safe, why did it feel like I'd just been buried alive? What if the thing they thought they took from me, my freedom, was never the most dangerous thing I still had? You don't realize how loud silence can be until no one is listening for you anymore. Rose Hill wasn't quiet. It was full of noise. Wheels squeaking down hallways, televisions murmuring to no one in particular, the soft cries of people who had forgotten which name to call for help. But none of it demanded a response. Sound existed here without consequence. The first morning I asked when I could speak to someone in charge. The administrator's in on Wednesdays, the nurse said, flipping through her chart without looking at me. It was Monday. I'd like to call my son. She paused, then shook her head. No phone privileges listed under your care plan. My care plan. I sat on the edge of the bed and folded my hands like a child waiting to be corrected. There's a moment when anger would make sense, but anger requires the belief that someone still owes you an explanation. I was already learning that no one here did. 3 days passed. No calls. No visits. No updates. On the 4th day, Sandra brought me a plastic bag with my name written on it in black marker. Inside were a blue cardigan, a scarf I hadn't worn in years, and my winter coat, the gray one with the broken zipper. Your son cleared out the house, she said. This is what he thought you'd want. Thought. As if my preferences were now a guessing game. In the dining room, a woman named Hilda sat across from me. 90 years old. Half blind. Sharp as glass. You're new, she said, stabbing at her peas. You'll learn not to complain. What happens if you do? They write you up, she replied. Mood disturbance. Then you get sent to therapy with a man who smells like cough drops and regret. I stopped chewing. At least your family visits, she added. Mine dropped me off 5 years ago and moved to Arizona. I nodded, though the word visits felt generous. That night, I hung my winter coat on the chair. Out of habit, I slid my hand into the pocket, expecting lint, maybe an old receipt. Instead, my fingers brushed against folded paper, thicker than it should have been. I pulled it out slowly. A lottery ticket. Powerball. Numbers filled in with black ink. The date stamped clearly across the top, 1 week ago. The same day Thomas brought me here. I stared at it, waiting for my brain to catch up. I didn't laugh, didn't gasp, didn't even smile. I just sat there, heart beating louder than it had in days, holding something that didn't belong in this place, or this version of my life. For the first time since the door clicked shut behind my son, I felt warmth spread through my chest. Not hope, not yet. Something quieter, more dangerous. A secret. Was it just a meaningless scrap of paper? Or the one thing they forgot to take from me? I didn't tell anyone about the ticket. Not Hilda. Not the nurses. Not even myself, at least not out loud. I folded it carefully and slid it back into the coat pocket, like returning a thought to a place where it couldn't be overheard. For 3 days it stayed there. You don't realize how much power comes from knowing something others don't until you've spent days being treated like you don't know anything at all. I walked the halls differently. Slower maybe, but steadier. The walls didn't feel as close. On Thursday morning I asked Sandra for the phone again. Emergency only, she said, not unkindly. My furnace might be on fire, I replied. She didn't smile. You don't live in that house anymore, Mrs. Leland. The sentence followed me all day. It sat beside me at lunch while I ate cold peas. It echoed in my head while Hilda talked about a bridge club she once ran in 1962, her hands moving as if still dealing cards. You've got quiet eyes, she said suddenly. I looked up. What does that mean? It means you're holding something back. I didn't answer. She didn't press. Old women know when to leave a door closed. That night I waited for the shift change. The younger nurse, the one who always scrolled on her phone, liked me because I never rang the bell or asked for pills. When she passed my room, I stood in the hallway like I'd been waiting for permission all my life. I think I left my hearing aid battery in my coat, I said. The gray one. Laundry room, maybe? She waved me toward the front desk. Just be quick. Don't set off the alarm. The phone sat there, old and scratched like it hadn't been touched in years. I picked it up with both hands. I didn't call my son. I didn't call a friend. I typed in the numbers manually. When the page loaded, my breath caught. I checked the date, then the numbers, then again. All 6 matched. The jackpot amount blinked back at me. $62 million. Unclaimed. I stood there frozen, while the nurse laughed at something on her screen just a few feet away. The world hadn't shifted. The walls hadn't cracked. But something inside me had realigned. I walked back to my room carefully, like I was carrying something fragile. I didn't sleep. My mind ran through possibilities I wasn't ready to name. I had no bank access, no car, no control over my own paperwork. And yet I wasn't afraid. The next morning, Sandra handed me a bingo schedule. I'd like to speak to a lawyer, I said. She laughed. About what? About confirming whether my son still has the legal right to decide my entire life. Her smile faded. I folded the paper and slid it into my pocket. The same pocket where the ticket rested, quiet, patient, waiting. If money can buy freedom, what happens when the person who controls your life never suspects you have it? The first rule I gave myself was simple. Say nothing. Power doesn't announce itself. It waits. It watches. It lets people underestimate it until they're comfortable being careless. I called my son that afternoon. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message right away. I let the silence sit. People reveal more when you don't rush to fill the quiet. When I finally spoke, I kept my voice even. Hi, Thomas. I found something in my coat pocket. Something you might want to know about. Call me. That was it. No explanation. No emotion. I hung up and sat very still. That evening, Hilda talked about her 4th husband and how he used to hide candy bars in the glove compartment like a child. I nodded at the right moments, laughed when she did, but my mind was elsewhere. Running through names that weren't mine. Fake names. Trusts. Legal intermediaries. Anything I'd ever heard rich people use to protect themselves from family. I wasn't rich yet, but I wasn't powerless either. He called back Sunday morning. Sandra handed me the phone with a curious look. It's your son. I took it slowly, the way you approach something that might bite. Hi, Ma, Thomas said. Too cheerful. I got your message. What did you find? There it was. No, how are you? No, are you okay? Just straight to the thing he thought might matter. A piece of paper, I said. A pause. What kind of paper? Oh, nothing important, I replied lightly. Something I meant to throw away. Silence stretched between us. Well, he said finally, his voice shifting into something smoother. That's good. Sometimes you misunderstand official things. I smiled. Not because he was right, but because he had no idea how wrong he was. After we hung up, I locked my door and took the ticket out again. I laid it flat on the desk like a contract with myself. I made a list. A lawyer. A bank account he couldn't touch. A new will. Time. The next day, I tore a small ad from the back of an old newspaper in the common room. Elder estate planning. Discretion guaranteed. I memorized the number. When I called, I used a name that wasn't mine. I'm calling on behalf of a relative in a care facility, I said. Power of attorney concerns. We deal with that often, the woman replied. Thursday, 2:30 p.m. I hung up and pressed the phone to my chest. That night, I sat by the window and imagined my house empty. My books gone, my kitchen stripped of its small rituals. They weren't just moving things. They were erasing me. But they'd missed something. And that something was already setting plans in motion. What happens when the invisible woman becomes the most dangerous person in the room? Thursday arrived slowly, like it knew something important was waiting and wanted to savor the tension. I spent the morning pretending to read, my hands folded neatly over a book I hadn't turned a page in. Every few minutes, my eyes drifted to the clock. Hilda noticed. Big plans? She asked, squinting at me over her glasses. In a manner of speaking, I said. At 2:29 p.m., a dark green sedan pulled up outside the front doors of Rose Hill. Not a taxi, not a delivery van. Something quieter. Intentional. The man who stepped out wore a gray suit and carried a leather briefcase. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look curious. He looked like someone used to being trusted with other people's messes. Elaine Matthews? He asked when he saw me waiting near the garden. That's me, I said, standing. We sat on a concrete bench surrounded by fake plants, fresh air designed on a budget. He opened his briefcase without ceremony. I'm Andrew Myers, he said. Estate planning. Power of attorney disputes. I told him everything. Slowly, carefully. How my son controlled my accounts. My house. My mail. How I hadn't signed anything willingly. He listened without interrupting. When I reached into my coat pocket, my hand didn't shake. I slid the ticket toward him. He checked the date. The numbers. Once. Twice. Have you verified it? He asked. Yes. Does anyone else know? No. Good, he said. Then we can protect you. He explained the plan like he was describing whether trusts, anonymity, legal shells, blind transfers. The money would never touch my son's reach. My name wouldn't appear anywhere public. What name will you use? I asked. Clara Whitmore, he replied. Ordinary. Forgettable. I liked it immediately. Do you want your family to benefit? He asked gently. I thought of the day Thomas kissed my cheek and walked away without looking back. No, I said. But I want my granddaughter safe. We built Rosie a future on paper: education, housing, health, protected from everyone, including me. When Andrew left, I stayed on the bench longer than necessary, breathing in air that smelled faintly of bleach and rain. For the first time since arriving at Rose Hill, I felt taller. That night, I wrote in my notebook, Day 13. My name is Doris Leland. But not for long. By Saturday morning, the ticket was no longer just hope. It was an asset. The trust was active. The claim would be anonymous. The money would move quietly, legally, and permanently out of reach. When Thomas called again, I didn't answer. I was too busy becoming someone he couldn't control anymore. But money alone doesn't free you. Especially when the people who trapped you realize they're losing control. People behave very differently when they sense control slipping through their fingers. Thomas showed up 3 days later. I recognized the car before I saw his face. My old Camry, freshly washed, parked too carefully in the visitor's lot. He walked in wearing a blazer he only used when he wanted to sound reasonable and be taken seriously. That blazer had helped him get promotions, convince banks, and apparently sign papers that erased his mother. Hey, Ma, he said softly, like we'd spoken yesterday. I didn't stand. You look good, he added, glancing around the room, as if checking whether I still belonged to it. I'm adjusting, I said. He sat across from me, crossed his legs, cleared his throat. We've been thinking. Maybe things moved a little fast. We. Always plural when responsibility needed sharing. You listed my house, I said calmly. His mouth opened then closed. A flicker, quick, unguarded, passed across his face. Just exploring options, he said. You're not using it. I leaned forward. I built that house with your father. I paid the taxes for 40 years. I buried him from that living room. Silence thickened. Marcia hadn't come this time. Smart woman. Thomas shifted in his seat. You said you found something, he said carefully. In your coat. I watched his hands. They were trembling slightly. Yes, I said. A reminder. A reminder of what? That I still exist. He forced a laugh. Mom, you're being dramatic. No, I replied. I'm being accurate. That was the moment he realized something had changed. Not in the paperwork, not yet, but in me. The compliant version of his mother was gone. Do you need money? He asked. Clothes? Help. I don't need anything from you, I said. That part of my life is over. He stood unsettled now. We're family. Family doesn't lock the door and call it care. He didn't argue, just nodded tight-jawed and left. That night, I sat by the window and waited. Not for him, but for confirmation that the final door was ready to open. Because the truth was already moving toward me. Quietly, legally, irrevocably. What happens when the truth finally walks into the room? And the door closes behind it. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No drama. No audience. Just a judge who looked tired of lies and a stack of papers that told my story better than I ever could. I sat beside Andrew, my hand steady in my lap. Thomas sat across the aisle. Alone. The judge didn't waste time. The evidence spoke clearly. Accounts drained without consent, property listed without authorization, signatures processed without my knowledge. When she asked me if I'd been placed in care against my will, I answered simply, yes. When she asked if I was capable of managing my own affairs, I didn't hesitate. Yes. When she revoked the power of attorney, the sound of the stamp felt louder than any slammed door ever had. Outside, Thomas followed me down the steps. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said. No, I replied gently. You thought you were the only one who could. He asked about the money. I smiled. You'll never touch it. That was the moment the opening hook finally made sense. They hadn't locked me away because I was weak. They locked me away because they thought I was finished. They were wrong. I left Rose Hill quietly the next morning. No speeches. No revenge. Just a signed release and a car waiting that wasn't there to control me, but to take me home. Not my old home. A new one. A small white cottage near the water. One chair. One window. One key that belonged only to me. That first night, I slept without anyone checking on me. Without permission. Without fear. I made tea in the morning. Burned the toast. Opened the window. And for the first time since the door at Rose Hill closed so quietly behind me, I understood the truth. They never took my power. They only reminded me I still had it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that age is not weakness, that silence is not consent, and that your life is still yours, like this story so more people can see it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real human stories that matter. Because no one gets to lock you away and call it love.